Hello everyone, this is GothamChess here to help you to realize your potential. And today we're going to be looking at my game versus Evgeny 11 on my old account Razortees. This game took place a number of years ago, and I copied it from my old account to here. It took place on June 22nd of 2020. This was actually one of the first games that I played where I beat a GM, and very strong GM. He was 27-24 in Ne6 Blitz at the time. Yevgeny 11. And this game was actually a game I was thinking about while I was playing the other game I showed yesterday against Ants Shah. And today we're going to be going through both of those games and looking at the similarities. So this game started with c4. I played b6, the Owens. My opponent played g3. I played bishop to b7. And my opponent played knight f3, and I took the knight. Now, already you might be thinking, okay, how in the world is this similar? Like, already you've busted his structure at the cost of the two bishops. But hang on, we're going to get to that. We have e6, d4, knight f6, knight to c3, bishop to b4, f4, so this way you can open up the light squared bishop on the diagonal, and also threaten to play f5 to damage my formation. I gave up the other bishop here. He took, and here I played c6. And this was a grave mistake, but my opponent didn't take advantage of it. Here, he needed to play the move bishop to a3. He needed to cut me off from castling, and when I played d6, this cost a tempo. And I want to be able to play d5 right away, and so that's the problem. In this given position, I should castle. Now if he plays bishop to a3, I can just calmly play rook to e8, and then set up the same ideas that I used in the game, with d5 and c6 making a wall against the light squared bishop. And as you can see, this position is basically equal. So here, this move c6 was a big mistake, but he didn't punish it. I castled, he castled, and now already we're back to him just having a slight advantage. Instead of castling, he should have played this right away as well, and if rook to e8 here, he can just park the bishop here, screwing up my development, having a strategically winning position. But after castles, the routine moves, but you should never play routine moves, guys. Always look and see what's going on in the position, if it's a position that you haven't been in before. I'm sure he hasn't, since he's a GM, and if he had this position before, he would have played the correct move instead of blitzing out castling. But now I get d5, blocking his light squared bishop. He plays f5, undermining my structure. I do not want to wind up with a backward pawn on the open e file, so I must take. As you can see from the engine, everything else is pretty much losing. So now, after takes, bishop g5, pinning my knight to my queen, I take the other pawn. He plays d5, detonating the center, and now I take this pawn as well, which was not the best move. Better was to kick the bishop, force the trade, and now if he takes here, I can just take. And here, I'm up 2 pawns, but also I'm going to be able to bring the rook to the center with tempo on the queen. Even if he tries to put pressure on the knight, it doesn't matter because I have 2 ways of defending it. And this way is perfectly fine. This way is also perfectly fine, because here, even if we get trades and he gets a7, I'm going to get c3, with a passed pawn 3 squares away from promotion. Here, though, he played d5, I played takes. He took, I took, and here he played bishop takes, which is a losing mistake. If he played queen takes, I have knight to a6 here. And giving up the queen for the 2 rooks is not a good idea, because of the pawn weaknesses in his position. Plus, my knight can live on c5, maybe even upgrade to d3. There's zero problems for me in this position, and there's no way he's going to be able to activate these rooks to get to my king when he has weaknesses here and here. So, bishop takes, knight to c6, blocking the attack on the rook. Now he scoops up c4, and now he's only down one pawn. But now I have knight to a5. And you might be thinking, what in the world is the similarity between this game and the Ernst Shah game? Well, we're going to be getting to that very shortly. We have bishop to d5, rook d8, pin the bishop to the queen. He plays queen f3. I play rook c8, now targeting the c pawn. He brings his rook to defend. I play g6, which protects f5. Also, I can scoot the king up to g7 to defend the queen, also to get out of the pin on f7 and put my king on the dark square where it can no longer be targeted by the bishop. So this whole game, if you've noticed, I've been making this light squared bishop bad. I gave him the bishop pair, then I put up a wall of pawns on the white squares to work against the bishop, and then finally, I've totally evicted myself on this diagonal. I got all the pieces off of this line. So now we have a situation where this bishop is terrible and this knight is actually very good. So now, after these moves, rook c5, I'm going to dog power on c3. He leaves the foul. Now I take the pawn. Now I'm back up to being up 2 pawns. Now change the rooks. And here, he can't really afford any trades. All of the trades are going to be bad for him because it's just going to get me closer to victory. And I also have 2-1 on the queen side, and this bishop can't target these pawns either. So now knight c6, he can't afford a trade because if he trades, I'm going to take, he's going to have to play rook d5 to block. I can just walk the king up, and what is he going to do here? Like, he doesn't have a check, and he's stuck in a pin. Even if he does something like this, king to e6, and he's going to drop this rook, or he's going to have to go back and allow a trade, which then allows me to just put the rook behind the pawn and play b5, a5, b4, and that's game over. So now, because he can't afford a trade, he has to play a suboptimal move. So he brings the rook over, I bring the knight over. He brings the queen, counterattacks the knight, I put the knight on g4. Now I'm harassing the rook, and I'm repositioning the knight. So now we have rook to d3, queen e5, again harassing him for trades. He can't trade, so he avoids it. Now I put the knight on f6, where it's better placed than it was on a5. So now, when we go back, we have the knight on a5, return to c6, go to e5, go to g4, go back to f6, which safeguards my king. Now I can bring the queen and rook deeper into his territory. So we have bishop f3, knight to e4, again with the trades, because now if bishop takes, now I have queen takes, and I have the undoubling of the pawns, with a threat to play e3 later potentially on the table. But queen takes is better because the king is open, so I don't want to actually close this line if at all possible. So, after queen e2, rook to e8, rook d7, rook e7. Now, the 7th rank is guarded, which is where my potential weaknesses lie. But again, he can't trade rooks, because trading rooks just gets him closer to being officially lost. He can't do anything, because if he ever throws in a check, I'm just going to block, and then I'm going to slowly improve. So, he plays rook to d8. Now I play queen c5, keeping an eye on f2. Now the queen can't leave. So queen to b2, and now queen c3. Again, seeking trades and being annoying. So now after queen to e2, rook e6. Now I want to put the rook on f6 potentially and push f4 to break his structure. So he plays rook to d3. I play queen a1. I'm not leaving this diagonal because I don't want him to ever have a check, because that's the only way he can win, is to try to get a check. If I put the king on the ace rank, he's going to bring the rook down, and I'm going to get mated in the corner. So queen c2, knight c5, rook back to d1, queen e5 now dominating the file, and after queen to d2, f4. Now f4 is not the most effective way to win, but it is a way to win. I sacrifice the pawn to break his structure open, and after takes, queen to f5, queen c3, rook f6, rook d4, and now knight to e6. And now the knight finally gets to e6, which is where it belonged in this type of structure, because I wanted to play f4, bring the knight to e6, and then play for the final assault on the king. So here he played rook to e4, I played knight takes, he played king g1, and I played knight d5. Now his queen and his bishop are hanging. So he played queen to e5, I took the bishop, and here he played queen d4. If he takes the knight, then it's just going to be mate. He has no alternatives here but to allow this to happen. So, because of this, he plays queen to d4 to defend f2, but now I'm just a piece up. So we have knight f4, takes, 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 and because I had about 5 seconds here, he tried to flag me, which did not work out successfully. I wound up checkmating him on the board. Just a good old-fashioned ladder mate. Now, when we go to this game in USAID, this started as a Queen's Indian, and I did not take the knight. However, when we get to this position, let's look at some of the similarities. You see, I put the one knight on e6 because I had to stop him from parking on d4, f4. We already have this 2 pawns working against this bishop by being on dark squares. We have the fact that I evicted the diagonal on purpose. I got all of my pieces off the diagonal. I even gave him the light squared bishop, right? But now he has the bishop, but it's shooting into thin air. So now here, I just had to make sure the pawn was defended. And then my threat was to bring the knight back and then push the pawn down the board. But in the game, I wound up being able to bring the knight back to e6 with strong effect as well by fighting against this rook coming to c7 at all, and being able to play knight to g5. And when we look at this structure, we have the same structure that's featured in this game. We have, in the U8 game, there's a 2-2 on the queen side and 3-3 on the king side. Everything's symmetrical, but the knight is stronger than the bishop because the bishop doesn't have targets. In the game that I played against Evgen 11, when we go back and we look at this position, all the way back here, right? The knight seems like it's bad because it's on the edge of the board. But the bishop is worse because it doesn't have a target. I'm never going to let it get to the sensitive f5 point. And having doubled f-pawns helps me tremendously because I don't have to worry about h7 either. Also, because of the fact that these pawns are doubled, I have one for defense, the pawn on f7, and one for offense, the pawn on f5. Because I don't want to keep the doubled pawn, I want to jettison the pawn to break his defenses down, as happened in the game. So, once we reach this type of position, like, what is he going to do? My knight is eventually going to float to the e6 square. And once it's able to reach e6, as we're seeing in the game, it's game over. Now, either I can jettison the pawn, as in the game with f4, or I could prepare it if he doesn't fight the way that he did, which was to try to stop it. So I had to throw the pawn away first, otherwise I would optimize the piece placement first and then break down its position on the f-file. So a little bit of a shorter video today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. In learning how to fight against the bishop on the long diagonal in these systems, one way is you can just put up the wall after trading your own bishop. Another way is just leave the diagonal because he's going to target it. But if you can leave this guy shooting in the thin air, a knight versus the bishop is ideal. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.